Thank you to everyone for joining us today. My name is Mike Whitmire. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Flowcast. And today we're doing our 4th episode of our CPA to CFO podcast series. For some context here, my background is in accounting. I'm a CPA and used to be in the space. And when I was an accountant, my career goal was to always become a CFO. And in founding Flowcast and working with a lot of great CFOs and kind of seeing how companies scaled, I just realized I didn't really know what skills I would have needed to make that leap. So that was the inspiration for this series, is reaching out, speaking with CFOs of different backgrounds to really give advice to CPAs and help us all move up within our career. So today I'm really excited. We have Ronette Kite on the line today, and let's stop talking about me and my background. Let's kick straight into you. So I want to get to know you a little bit on a personal level before talking career. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Mike, and thanks for having me. So my name is Ronette Kite, and I have actually 2 kids. One is 11 and 9, so I'm a mom of 2 young ones. So my life of juggling quite a bit, during the weekend and the weekends is an art. My kids are very involved in sports and have various activities. We like to give our kids opportunities to try different things outside of school. And one of the things that we're really involved with is baseball. My son, actually, we just got back this summer, which was an all-star season. Our son's team went pretty far through divisional state. So decided to watch the Little League World Series here this weekend. But that's a lot of my time is around baseball and his team. My daughter's also involved with softball. Room mom. So just really active in my kids and family, and making the best of our time, our free time, that we have.
Yeah. Well, it's I know those sports schedules with the kids of that age can be pretty demanding. We have a couple of people in our family going through that, but it's really cool that you're able to carve out time to be at a lot of those events, and it must be difficult. So is your kind of on that note, is your employer pretty flexible with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the high level is I'm a consultant, and I have clients that need expectations, and I'm a hybrid of a salesperson as well. So the good news is I can almost work from anywhere, and I make my own schedule in terms of what makes sense for me to schedule calls and meet with my clients, as well as do business development and bring on some new clients. So my kid had a tournament in San Diego, and I worked about 3 of the 5 days that we had off there, and some of the games were during the day, and came back to work and scheduled calls and got through my month-end close reviews, and continued on with emails. So it really is, especially these days, really nice to have control of your schedule and not have to be physically in an office 9 to 5. I think, especially for someone like me who's a breadwinner, my husband, fortunate is a stay-at-home dad, to be able to have the challenges of being a working mom, but still be able to participate in school activities and in after-school activities as well.
Yeah, that's an awesome setup that you've been able to structure there. So I know we just moved into career path a little bit there. So let's just hop right into it. So tell me about what you're doing, or tell us about what you're doing today.
Sure. So I am a Southern California lead and startup CFO consultant with Countsy, and Countsy is an outsourced back office firm that we basically outsource all of the accounting, finance, and HR services for VC-backed startup companies. So for those of you who are not familiar with the VC world, there are various startup companies that take outside investments. And when they do, these investors expect a good discipline and infrastructure and formality in issuing financials and back office structure, especially around local requirements around taxes and labor law. So once a founder gets funded Countsy will come in and we will provide a part-time CFO, accounting and HR resources so that that founder can focus on the business, and we just take all the back office off their shoulders. And so generally we're with a client for 2 to 3 years until they grow so big that they need to hire their in-house team themselves. And so my particular role is I spend 50% of my time as a CFO of a handful of clients. I have about 6 clients that I'm a CFO, which is always exciting because these clients are in various stages of growth. Some just got funded, some just closed a 30 million round. And so to see these clients start from literally their garage to all, to raising close to 50, 60 million and employing, hundreds of employees is really cool. So I enjoy still being a CFO. I want to be relevant. I want to know what challenges my clients have and what we need as CFOs. And that's a big part of that variety of work that I have. The other 50% of my time, I'm in business development. And so I'm keeping in touch with the VC community, the startup community, and founders, and continuing to talk to founders to see if Countsy would be a good fit for them.
Got it. And I'm curious, we're, as a business, we're a little bit unique in that 2 of the founders are accountants, right? But when you, and no need to speak to a specific client, but if you could broadly stereotype founders in the tech space, where would you put their financial literacy?
Yeah, so it varies. I have clients that founders are finance background, but they know that they can't spend their time doing this, and they need to hand it off because they need to focus on the business. I have founders that are very product tech based, that don't know a thing about QuickBooks, that need us to take care of. So it just varies across, kind of that spectrum. What generally happens, because our startup founders, especially here in LA, they're very frugal, they're very resourceful, and especially these days with the cloud-based tools, I mean, like Flowcast, right? I mean, there's so many things that integrate that really, if you're business savvy and you understand some sense of transactions, you don't have to be an accountant to get the to issue financials for a very small business.
Right.
What ends up happening is the business grows, and we find that the founders are spending their time, 10 o'clock in the evening or the weekends doing accounting stuff. And they're finding that that's not the best use of my time, and that's not what I want to spend that time with. And or they find out the hard way, year down the road, finding out, they're going through a due diligence process and they're asking for financials and they don't have anything. And unfortunately, when that happens, it's fire drill to get things together. So it generally happens one of those 2 ways where, a CEO's, wanting to do stuff on their own and be resourceful, and we keep in touch with them, and eventually they run out of time. They run out of, time themselves and want to outsource it, or they get into a fire drill situation where they're about to close a round and they have some questions and can't, and don't have answers. So
yeah, that's a really that's a very common problem we've heard, and it's amazing how much that due diligence process, when it's not clean, can hold up around. And in the venture world, I know for us personally, it's like when you get close to wanting to close that round of funding, you generally ramp up spend and the burn goes up, and you kind of need the money now, and then a 3-month delay from diligence can cause a really big problem. So
or even worse, you don't have the financials and you're working on a term sheet with a potential acquisition, and because your sales numbers aren't tying to the financials as what's in the bank, you're losing points or digits on that term sheet, which I've seen as well. So my favorite client is a serial entrepreneur, because generally those guys come in, they've already been through that bad experience, and they immediately want to outsource from the beginning. And they understand that when we don't do things right, there's consequences down the road.
Yeah. So That makes a ton of sense. They learn their first time around. It's good that the issues are corrected later. But that's like, these are two items that aren't really contemplated a whole lot when you think about finance and accounting, is like the impact on a round or M&A or an IPO. So anyway, that's really good stuff. Let's keep going back. Where were you before Countsy?
Yeah, so that is one of the things I wanted to talk about. You know, I fortunately have a very flexible schedule, and I'm able to make my schedule, but it's because of, I feel like it's because of where my career path's taken me to get there, right? I mean, I don't want anyone to think that they can immediately have, you know, this type of work-life balance, we'll call it. Little aging myself, I think, with that, but you know, immediately out the door, right? So my career path, you know, was Ernst & Young, you know, alumni like you. I was 6 years in big back then, it was Big Six, but Big Four accounting firm, and had some great clients. Was in the startup community then, tech, and was around with the dot-com boom and everybody going IPO, spending lots of time at the printers. And to be honest, I was going to be that partner. You know, I was on the partner track. I got early promoted to manager. You know, I was on the right accounts, and I was definitely on the partner track. And it's kind of funny because I already mentioned the baseball thing, but I had a vision of myself by the way, I didn't have kids back then, but I vision of myself.
Things changed a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I had a vision of myself not being able to go to Little League games, and or showing up to Little League games with my phone attached to my ear, or looking at work papers, right? And back then, they were hard copy work paper binders. And so I just looked for different opportunities. And I made my way to a public company, Fortune 500 company, Korn Ferry International. And it was a great transition from public accounting, because I was their corporate controller. I was primarily responsible for all the SEC reporting and SOX, and implementing SOX globally, worldwide. So we had about 40 countries that we consolidated financials here in LA. And I did that for a couple years. And it was a great transition from being in public accounting and going to a private IPO public company, and understanding how it is on the inside, and what needs to get done there. Then I went to a startup company. If I want to circle back, I want to touch on that audit to accounting transition. So it seemed like you've been in tech, basically you were in tech your entire audit career. That's correct. So you got to see, you know, a lot of high growth companies, presumably pretty early stage, going through the IPO process, and, you know, having a lot of fun doing that and learning a lot. And then you rounded out your skill set by going to Korn Ferry, which is, you know, bigger, more established, and you step into like a really process-driven environment, I have to imagine. Yep. But then at the same time, you're implementing SOX. Yeah. Like that's a huge project to all of a sudden you're putting a lot of change on a big organization in Korn Ferry. So like, can you just talk about what that implementation process looked like? And then I have a follow-up question, like, did that help you in the CFO role, like what you learned about the business operations? Yeah, definitely. So the interesting thing about Korn Ferry at the time is it is a big company. I think with 3,000 to 5,000 employees, but it's like a conglomerate of a lot of different small offices, right? Because you know, from Asia to Europe to Latin America, you know, these are smaller offices that were doing executive recruiting offices. So it was, you know, it's certainly a big company that's been around for a long time. So to your point, yes, very traditional, very corporate. I mean, we were wearing suits to the office every day. I still think they wear suits. Wow. And yeah, they do, because you're in executive recruiting and we're selling services, you have to look the part, and you're meeting with executives. So I'm pretty sure today they're still doing that. But it was a small office in that I think we had maybe 10 accountants, which is not a lot, you know, which is not a ton for how big the company was. 10 accountants in the corporate office. So
Right. And
So
then
yeah,
presumably people out on site at the subsidiaries.
exactly. So
Right. Yep.
basically, my job was to not only do the corporate accounting, which was probably like the people that fell in corporate was no more than 100 people. So it was a small company in and of itself.
Interesting.
Yeah, because a lot of them were part of the business, part of the North America business, and so we had less than 100 employees in the corporate office. Just think of it as back offices for Korn Ferry, and then we had literally 30 offices worldwide, and they consolidated into regions: Asia, Latin America, and Europe. And so there was a main consolidator in Europe that was our main point person that would consolidate the 10 or so European offices, and same with Asia, not so much Latin America at that time. And so, at this time when I left public accounting, it was definitely the time where SOX was being rolled out, and obviously hiring somebody Big Four was definitely a value to the company, because we knew
For sure.
what processes and documentation needed to happen around internal controls. And so it was, I think the good news is we were able to talk to the regions, who then rolled it out to the offices about the processes that we're going to change going forward. And everybody was just really, really embracing the changes.
Wow.
What had to happen. So, I literally went to an office, and these guys were still doing checks out of a checkbook, literally out of a checkbook. So,
Yeah.
that was a change, that we had to have. And so, so I traveled quite a bit. So again, not being married, not having kids, it was a great opportunity for me to go to Asia, for me to go to Europe, meet with the offices as someone from corporate, and talk about the changes and expectations going forward, understanding the culture changes, and then really just educating them on US GAAP and SOX implementation. And so I want to say that they were very, embracing and pretty much made the changes immediately, outside of what had to happen culturally, because, at the time, at least I remember in London, these guys weren't writing checks. These guys were literally EFTs, everything, right? They're way ahead. Whereas,
Yeah.
a country like France, that's all they were doing was just writing checks, and it was literally like the 3-part check. So, you just kind of work with those different cultures that are advanced or have a certain way that you have to adjust your processes accordingly. So yeah, that it taught me a lot in terms of international, in terms of what we have to do for statutory requirements overseas, internationally, tax, intercompany relationships, and just legal structure, right? Just U.S. legal structure and why we have entities. So that's a huge, in today's world, fast forward to today, when I talk to some startup companies, most, some of them are simple C Corp US based, but more and more have a subsidiary overseas that is just, London doing engineering work, or just in Taiwan doing product work. And
Right.
You have to be able to say, okay, well, that's going to be a separate entity, and this is kind of how we have to set up the books, and we have to talk about tax, your tax partners, what's advantageous, and how do we bring in legal to make sure. And so it's just really bringing the three together to make sure things are set up right from the beginning, so we're not caught later saying, oh, well, shoot, now we needed 2 different tax returns, and it's been a whole year, 2019, so now we have to go back and kind of bifurcate the financials, which is, a nightmare. So just fast forward to today, that international experience and understanding the legal structure and tax implications of having overseas activity was certainly important in how startup companies are setting up companies and making sure that they're set up correctly today.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So sorry, you went from Korn Ferry, now back to the startup world.
Yes. So very exciting time in startup, and PriceGrabber.com was my first startup. At the time that I joined, we were less than 100 employees. I want to say we're about 70 employees, and I was their head of finance that they hired.
Okay.
And literally within a couple months that I was hired, we were acquired by Experian. The exit was $475 million, and these were they took no investment, so it was bootstrapped. So
All right, good for the founders.
Yes, yeah, and employees, because at the time they were very, the startup world was very generous in giving employees a piece of the company, stock options, right? So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So what a way to start my first startup, right? It's like it's like your first flight and you're in first class, and then you're like, okay, well, I'll get back to the back of the bus, and this is the real world. So
it's so easy. It's free money. Yeah.
Right. We're cash flow positive. We have revenue. We're profitable, right? Like, no, that's not how it is. But it was a startup in that sense, but we got acquired quickly, so we had to get absorbed by a big public company once again. And from talking about Korn Ferry and my experience there, I'm now the exact flip of what I was, right? I'm the subsidiary reporting up corporate. So number one, I get what corporate needs and why they need it, and I was able to implement and formalize, because even though the company had exited, in that amount, things, the processes weren't quite as formalized as we'd want. I mean, the company grew so fast, so quickly. And so there was a lot of processes we had to implement to get all the checks and balances in place and deliver monthly GAAP financials to our corporate office on a monthly basis. So so that was another good experience, and played again 2 roles there, and that I was head of finance of what was now close to 150 employees, growing very, very fast, but at the same time accompanying our CEO to corporate, talking about the business and where we're at, and forecasting the business, and talking about our strategy and how we're going to meet numbers. So that was a really good experience. Definitely, right-hand person to the CEO in terms of joining him to corporate, talking about the business, discussing variance analysis versus budget, and talking about the forecast and where we were for the next quarter and year. So a lot of experience and good experience that I was exposed to. Not only a great corporate office, Experian Interactive is who PriceGrabber rolled up to, and just kind of having that exposure directly with a CEO. I mean, that's really where I fell in love with startup. It was, I mentioned, it's kind of funny because I mentioned the suits, and the first thing that I was excited about going to startup is, wow, I don't have 2 different closets where I have my closet is my suits that I have to put on Monday through Friday. And then my left side of my closet is my wardrobe that I would wear. And it was like now 1 wardrobe, right? And that's, I mean, it's small, but it's a big deal, right? You get dressed every morning, right? And so, and it's not just getting dressed, it's feeling like that this is the place for you. Like, this fits your personality, so that's kind of why.
And sorry to cut you off, but like as an auditor, I mean, you were in the tech space, and I was in film and entertainment back when I was doing it, and we're wearing business casual, and everyone's walking around the office in t-shirts, shorts, a hat, right? And you just feel so out of place as the nerdy auditor there.
Yeah, I mean, and while I was at Ernst & Young, they did allow us to go from suits to business casual, right? Which was still pretty, it was a suit without the jacket, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's all it was.
Yeah, take off the tie, take off the jacket, you're still, in a suit. And for the women out there that knew, I mean, we still had to wear pantyhose, closed-toed shoes, no shoulders showing, like the whole bit. Pants are, so it was still, our business casual was still pretty business. It was more business today, than today's world. Whereas, startup, where you're in jeans and a nice t-shirt, right? And I never wore flip-flops, but my toe, I definitely started wearing open-toe shoes, and, just different, and it really does make a difference because, Mike, I mean, you're the CEO of your company and you're in a Dodger hat and a t-shirt. And I mean, that's you, right? That's Mike. That's Mike Whitmore. You find him on the weekend, he's going to be in a t-shirt and a Dodger hat, right? And
I literally, it's a weekend outfit.
Exactly. And I mean, it's a small thing, but there's a lot to be said about marrying that personal and business so that you feel like yourself at work. You don't feel like you have to act or dress a certain way that's not real, that's not authentic to you. So that was an eye-opening moment for me. And I was very grateful and had great opportunities at Ernst & Young. I worked with some of the best partners in tech and the smartest partners and had a lot of great opportunity being a woman, being all the time. I was the highest level woman in the room. At Woodland Hills, I was a manager. I was like the only woman from my level up. And I had a lot of great opportunities there. And same thing for Korn Ferry International. Like I mentioned, not only did I was able to travel, but I, implemented global, I implemented SOX globally. Another project we didn't touch upon, but it's an interesting one is, we moved. Our office had to move, and it was about 200 employees that had to move literally 2 blocks. And we scoped out a place, and that was completely gutted. And they said, Ronette, we're putting you on this project, right? And you're like, okay, I'm the accountant behind the desk.
Yeah.
How am I going to do a build out and move 200 people? And I remember my boss, who at the time was a controller. So I was assistant controller. And he said, Ronette, you're smart, you're organized, you'll get it done. Right. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. They believe that I can get this done. I remember sitting in my first contractor, like literally the general contractor, the architect, the landlord, and me. And they were talking about conduits. And I'm like, okay, I came home that night and I'm like, I talked to my husband. I'm like, what the heck is a conduit? And he explained it to me. And so, it's all about, and it was a tough process because it was diving into something that I had no familiar, I didn't know about I didn't know about any of it, but it really was coordination. It was staying on budget. It was communicating with our head executives as to what finishes we wanted to do. It was making sure our architect was giving us what we wanted, and then our general contractor was staying on time. And it was a lot of meetings of making sure that all happened, and any issues you just raised to our executive team and let them know, hey, we're running behind. Hey, instead of this stone because it's not available, now it's in. I remember like China, like they were going on strike for the steel and we couldn't get steel to put in, walls. It was just crazy. But and I remember talking to our in-house legal at the time and saying, gosh, this is such a project. The good news is they took everything for the most part off my plate so I can focus on this. And he said, Ronette, you are going to have thick skin after this project. And he was right. He was right. I was able to hold my own and have difficult conversations and communicate expectations and have those conversations that people generally don't like to have. And so it was an interesting project that I was put on, again, talking about the opportunities that I've had. It was an interesting project that I was put on that really helped me just kind of just really helped me be more aggressive, in the workplace in terms of, you don't always have to like nod your head and yes, of course I can get it done. No, I can't get it done. Like that's an impossible request. No.
Yeah.
So that, everyone has a hard time saying no or, yeah.
But it is okay to say no sometimes. You got to work on the most valuable stuff, right? What's gonna drive value for the business. And this facilities and moving work, this is something that people definitely don't think about as they're moving into the CFO role. Like, it is a CFO responsibility doing all this stuff, and I can relate. I had to oversee this process for Flowcast moving 1, 2, 3 times now, and negotiating with general contractors is not the most fun thing in the world. What ultimately happens is I end up auditing all the prices I get from them, right? And it's like, I highly recommend for everyone watching this that you audit all the bills you get from your general contractor, because they are made up and they come out of the ether. But and it's just one of those administrative tasks. You're like, wow, I'm shocked that a CFO kind of handles this, but it makes a ton of sense, and it's something that's important to learn about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the experience at Price Grabber was great because it really turned me on to, this is really, I fell in love with startup, and this is really for me because, the progression of my career got me to the point where I was really able to feel like this is where I belong, this is where I add value. And so, really having exposure, really having exposure to the CEO directly was huge, and having an integral part of the business where I had a seat at the table and I was head of finance, and people listened, and people, when I said, no, we can't be running expense reports like that anymore, people adjusted. And so that was a great part of really being able to add value and see the immediate results, in the startup world.
Yeah, that's really, it's cool that you found the space you like, right?
Yeah.
It's like the industry you like and the stage of business that you like as well. I don't think a lot of people really get there. And it almost seemed intentional for you. Like, when I think back on the first portion of your career, you're talking about, you were at Ernst & Young, you were working with earlier stage and then seeing through IPOs as well. So that's like many different phases of a business, is going from zero to IPO. And then you went to the bigger business, got to learn how that operates, and started to get with SOX compliance and all that stuff, moved to a startup. Then you saw the acquisition, and then you got to do all the finance, and suddenly these facilities opportunities opened up. And it was just like, I mean, how planned was that? That's like a very well-rounded resume for getting the CFO position. Was that intentional, or did it organically happen?
No, it really organically happened. And like I said, I just had really good opportunities of people who introduced me to, the next opportunity, and really scoping it out, and talking to the right people. And, there's always a crossroads, and you're not quite sure, which way you're going to go. Because, I knew when I went to startup, that I'd be potentially giving up and being obsolete in the public world. And so I knew once I went to startup, I said, if I stay there 4 or 5 years, going back to a public company could be dangerous because I've been out of the loop for so long. And even though I wasn't making, you could always go back, but you'd be a little obsolete. And so it was definitely a crossroads for me. And I think the answer is, there's no wrong answer. I think I would have been successful either way, but I talked to so many people, and I had so many mentors along the way that really knew me and just laid it out and were transparent with the reality of, working for a public company, or the reality of working at a startup, and helping me make my choice, and helping me make the choices along the way. So I think definitely, you'll have different mentors throughout your career process as you go into different stages of companies, into different industries. Those mentors or peers are so important to bounce things off of, and get people's input to make sure that, you've considered everything.
Yeah. And, in terms of getting the CFO role at all, it's can be challenging to get that opportunity. And at Countsy, that's awesome. And it sounds like, networking was first of all, being good at what you do is a great way of networking, right? People want to hire you wherever they go. But beyond that, was there anything like formulaic you did from networking? Is there a way you think about it? Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I think I think because I fell in love with the startup world, I naturally enjoyed being part of that community and meeting more and more people who were founders. And it's a cycle, right? It's a cycle.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the founders of PriceGrabber and many of the people there that were early on went ahead and founded their own companies or second companies. And I kept in touch with them, and then, and then they have friends that founded their own companies, and it just kind of continues to grow as you.
Yeah.
It's that once you're passionate about something, you really enjoy doing it, and it just kind of flourishes on its own. It's not forced. It's not something you have to do. And so that, I think that's how I got into that is the experience that I had, knowing that I really did enjoy working with founders, and I enjoyed that startup community, and then continuing to be active, there. The way that I came into Countsy, and it's interesting because I did go to another startup after PriceGrabber. It was not the same story. It's not the same startup experience as I had, but I really did learn a lot. I was there just as long, and we pivoted and had trouble raising money. And I really did learn much more. When you're watching that checkbook and making sure certain checks don't get cashed, so you have enough in the bank, you learn a lot, right? So when I was there, that's kind of when I said, gosh, you don't need full-time CFOs or full-time controllers on these small companies. And I felt like at the time we were just, it's like, figure it out and you figure it out and make it happen. And it's like,
yeah,
wait,
totally.
I barely have enough money in the bank, and I have very little room and time for mistakes. And now I'm trying to figure it out. And I just felt like there was a better process to leverage people's experience in growing companies. And so I really on my own knew I wanted to do, interim CFO work. And when I talked to a couple of different firms, I really enjoyed talking to Countsy because number one, they've been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah.
And number two, they were out of Mountain View. And what else? I mean, who's going to have a better experience at that time than out of Mountain View?
Yeah.
So they hired me as their first hire in LA to grow the business here in LA. So it was definitely, again, another interesting experience because now they wanted me to sell. Well, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not a salesperson. I've been an accountant. I've been a CPA. And, the good news is when they gave me the opportunity, there wasn't a ton of pressure in sales. It was, look, Ronette, just get to know what we do, get to know the community, and let's just see how this works out. And luckily I was able to close some deals and start that and get the confidence in the company that they said, well, there's really something out in LA that we need to expand. So outside of Mountain View, LA was the first market that we expanded to. And I was the first hire to help grow that community and business. And so, fast forward 5 years later.
And I sorry to cut you off, but I know Martini over at Countsy, and she's obviously in the Mountain View office. How did you get connected with their Accretive Solutions at the time? How did you get connected with now Countsy, to even get that opportunity?
Well, it was interesting. So Gavin Block, who's our now market leader, he had worked at the time, I believe, with Robert Half, and we had a relationship because he helped me hire my interim controller at one point at PriceGrabber. And so we were networked, and he was in transition, and we had literally just got on the phone a month earlier and said, I'm in transition, I'm looking, and I said, look, I'm in transition and I want to do interim CFO stuff. This is something that I want to do, and I'm talking to people about it. So when he landed the job at Accretive, he saw that we had this startup community or startup business, and he immediately introduced me to Martini and said, we've got to hire Ronette. So
cool.
Definitely through Gavin and definitely through my network was that. And every job that I have, because everybody always asks, right? Every job that I've had along the way has been a referral, right? It hasn't been, even though I work for Korn Ferry, it hasn't been through a recruiter. It's been through a referral through a network. So it's definitely goes to say something about the network that you build and the confidence in the people that you work with or work for, in referring to you. So
that's so like I want to stress to the audience how important that is. There's a very real opportunity for you if you're great at what you do and people enjoy working for you, that you might never have to prepare a resume again, because they're just going to hire you into their new companies as they move around. Like,
Yep.
I've hired executives who you'd think like, oh my gosh, you're hiring a VP, the resume better be pretty good. None of my VPs have handed me resumes because it's all based on, it's referral based. And I don't need to hear your resume. I want to hear from someone who worked for you and can verify that you were a great person to work with. So definitely important in like maintaining the network, being good at what you do, and being a good person that people want to work with is like the best way to just propel your career. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
anyway.
Having good business acumen, it's easy to say and not easy to do, right? And
Yeah.
you don't realize it, and not just in the business world, in any world, in your community, you never realize where you're going to cross paths in the future, or where somebody might know somebody that, puts the brakes on something because you ruffled feathers at some point. And it's always good to make sure that, I always tell people, especially when today's world, people are changing jobs more often than, years ago when people stayed at a job for 10 years. Look, what people are going to remember is how you leave and transition, not how you got there and what you did. So when you leave,
really good point. Yeah.
right? When you leave, give the proper notice. Talk about that transition. Don't leave people hanging. Make sure the people around you are taken care of, whoever is going to take care of her, and that opportunity is waiting for you. And there's always that pressure of, well, we want you to start now, but I need you 2 weeks. And it's like, look, you probably been waiting for a new CFO already for 2 or 3 months. What's another 2 or 3 weeks that I need to give to my other job? Because I want to leave them in good hands. I want to make sure that my handoff is so that I don't leave and they don't go, gosh, what the heck was Ronette doing the last 2 months?
Yeah.
Right?
That's really.
And that happens because there wasn't a proper transition. Like, they didn't realize, oh, I was working on that project, but it was stopped because we didn't have, but whatever it is. But if you have a proper transition and you go through the list of everything that you do and all your open items, then hopefully when you leave, it's not oh my gosh, she was all over the place, right? Because that's not going to help anybody anywhere. And
that's super smart. It's like, it goes to the human nature of what have you done for me lately, basically. Yeah. And yeah, you can have a great 3 or 4 year run, but if you leave people hanging, that's what they'll remember. That's a really good point.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
And same goes with, and I see this a lot today because we transition a lot off and on, for firms. But same goes when you start a new job. And I've seen a lot of people they start a new job and they want to come in as Superman and the hero. And they sit there and they talk a lot of crap about the person that was in that before, right? And,
yeah.
Don't make assumptions that this is all that the person had to do, right? I mean, the company was growing really, really fast at the time. This person was not only doing the accounting, but was taking out the trash and ordering the food and making sure,
moving buildings. Yeah.
Right, moving into buildings. And so when you come in and people are really judgmental or really critical as, oh, well, the accounting here was horrible, like that, I see that so much when you come on board, when people come on board. And it does nobody any favors. Like, I know you want to look like the hero. You'll look like the hero if you take what you have and make what you need to without, degrading the people that were there before. Because you don't know what situation they're in. You don't know all the stuff that they were doing. Like, don't know what budget they had. So don't.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways. You exiting, offboarding into one company, make sure you do that right. And when you onboard, you take what you have and you make what better, and don't worry about what happened in the past.
Yeah, that's not a good look to come in and bash people really for no reason. There's no benefit to that. It's just a bad look. And then also, presumably, some of the team is still there, and you're kind of in a roundabout way bashing their work, and you're still working with them, and that's just not a good look. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was So that was super helpful. I think you have that's an awesome career and very like, rounded out. The question I love to end with is, and you might actually do this, like at some of your clients, you work with them and you help scale them up. And then when it is time for a full-time CFO, do you help in that hiring process at all?
By the time we transition off, which is about 2 or 3 years, the first hire that they really hire, it's different, but the first hire is usually some type of VP of finance and or maybe even a controller. So we roll off in various ways.
Are they VP of finance, but like head of the department, or is there a CFO already? They're basically head of finance at that point.
Right. I want to say when we roll off, they're hesitant to hire a CFO immediately because still there's no need for a full-time CFO just yet. Exactly. I think that comes down the road. So by the time we roll off, it's generally like a VP of finance, still head of finance, probably acting as a CFO, but there is no title there. But that person is taking on a lot of the duties and coordination that we have. So the answer is yes. For the most part, when we, when hopefully we're the ones telling the client, look, it's time that you hire somebody in-house. We're struggling meeting some of the needs that you have, and I feel like your business is growing, and you need somebody more intimate in the business, not somebody that's remote and on the outside. So hopefully we're the first ones to tell them that they need to hire somebody. And generally, we help them with the spec of, hey, this is the kind of person that you need.
Awesome.
And we always request that we help out with the interview and we help give, a thumbs up or thumbs down. Some of our clients, unfortunately, they go on their own, they hire somebody, and then we work with them, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But it's always helpful when you can include us, because number one, we have a lot of experience of hiring, and we know kind of other skill sets and expertise that person needs to have in where you are and where you're going to grow to. So
well, that's awesome to hear, because my question is, when what I like to say is, when you're hiring your replacement, what are you looking for, and what are some interview questions, and like just what do you look for from a background, intangible, and then just other areas?
Yeah, so definitely the people that we've hired to kind of take over some of the duties that we're doing definitely are generally big four CPAs and or investment bankers. All right, so they generally are at that level because it's a higher level, generally a CPA or MBA, or somebody that's come up through the startup community and has done a lot of startups.
So let's come from the perspective of they have a CPA background. So with that person, what are you looking for?
Yeah, so generally it's hard to hire somebody straight out of Big Four straight into a startup, especially at this phase. Let's just say it's a Series B, they raised 20 million. There's so much, I have to say at that point, that head of finance or that head of finance person, maybe 20 to 30% is going to be accounting, what they're doing, right? The other 20 or 30% definitely finance, forecasting, modeling, debt, how are we, if they have to negotiate debts and loans and financing, they're doing a lot of that. And then the other 30% is likely going to be HR, facilities, insurance, and business licenses, working with our tax team. So it's just going to be kind of the plethora of all things within the back office to run.
Yeah.
So generally, if you come up that CPA role, you have maybe 30%, but the rest, if you don't have exposure to that's kind of difficult to hire. So at that point, we're CPA, Big Four, local, some type of discipline around understanding accounting and that discipline is super important. And then small business, like actually getting into a medium to small business and running things. Have you ran?
Where you have broader responsibility at that.
Yep. And have you ran a department? Have you built a department? Have you come in to something of nothing and created something, right? And a lot of at least in the startup world, and maybe this is why I enjoy it, a lot of it is chaotic. You're coming into a very chaotic environment and creating order, right? You're creating some organization, some processes and order, and you are not the good guy all the time, right? A lot of
that is very true.
yeah, you are not the good guy. So sometimes it's this person keeps turning in expense reports, but I have not seen one receipt. At this point, we're not going to reimburse them until they can produce a receipt, right? It's that. And sometimes it's why haven't we fired this person, right? I've heard from this person and this person that they're not meeting expectations, and now they're being difficult, and now they're barely showing up to work. Why haven't we fired this person already? And so, and I mean, and that's your job, right? As a CFO, it is your job. It is your job to mind the finances of the company. It is your job to be that partner of a CEO, and from a finance perspective, give them your input into the long-term financial health of the company. And also, and that includes employees and employees that are productive versus not productive. And it includes
And the reality is that at most startups and at tech startups, the vast majority of the spend is on people, and that's the area where you really do need to focus on. And that's another area that I hadn't processed as a CPA, is how much HR really rolls up into finance and how important that is under the CFO function.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally. And you know what? You don't have to be an HR expert, right? Because the California labor laws change all the time. And again,
so much.
Yeah. And then you don't have to be an expert in accounting, because hopefully you'll hire a good accountant that knows revenue recognition and the latest requirements there. You as a CFO, you have to be able to oversee the back office functions and be supportive of the company growing, and be supportive when the company grows so fast that we can't even hold up the company, right? I mean, that is your job. So you don't have to be an expert in every little thing. You do have to be able to oversee it all, be very courageous in taking on tasks that you have no idea and never had any exposure to. And you have to be able to have very hard conversations. And sometimes the conversations are with vendors. Sometimes it's with your salespeople that may or may not be producing. Sometimes it's with the CEO and saying, look, I know you want financials tomorrow, but here's everything that needs to get done, and I don't want to give you something, or give you something to give to potential investors or potential acquirer that's not going to make any sense, because all that's going to happen is they're going to do due diligence, and they're going to have 50 questions that I can't answer because we didn't do this correctly, right? And so it's really about kind of managing up and managing those expectations, and being really real with the work that needs to be done, because the back office stuff also there's a lot of little things that need to get done, and guess what? No one wants to hear about it, right? The CEO doesn't want to hear about, we have to apply for a business license, and we have to file taxes, and if we don't have the license, we won't have it. He doesn't want to hear about it. He or she does not want to hear. What they want to hear is it's done. It's done. It's been taken care of. They don't want to hear the details of everything you had to do to get there to get it done. They want to hear that it's done, and that we're at low risk, because that's the last piece of a CFO, is keeping the company, risk very low. And then whether that's from an insurance perspective, whether that's from a labor perspective, tax perspective, you are responsible for making sure that the company is not at risk. So that's another big CFO.
Yeah, that risk mitigator role is another interesting component of this whole thing. Well, that was awesome. I've taken up way too much of your time. I want to wrap this now. So last question I like to ask is, as you kind of reflect on all the career we just talked through in different areas, like, what would you say are some of the biggest takeaways and things that our audience should really latch onto and focus on?
Just know that for me, and maybe I'm a little more traditional, but you have to put in the work. You have to put in the work. I cannot tell you when back in my Ernst & Young days, we worked 80-hour weeks on those IPO.com days, no doubt.
Yeah.
So I guess, when I say that I can go to my son's baseball game during the day and come back and work, you have to put in the work to be able to get to a point where you have a little bit more flexibility and responsibility in your schedule. And
Totally. And it's like, you don't know what my 20s looked like. I worked a whole lot in my 20s.
Right.
That was something else. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so then number one is you have to put in the work. At the end of the day, if I, and you've helped me reflect on my career just in this conversation alone, like all of them were stepping stones. Yeah, all of them were stepping stones to where you're at. And I couldn't be the CFO consultant that I am today without all of those learnings along the way. Some of them were great experience, and some of them were really tough experience, very stressful experiences, right?
In fact, there's generally a correlation between learning opportunity and working a ton of hours with it. Right. But it's at the end of the day, you learn so much, and it does help you in your career. Yeah,
it really does. And then I would say the one takeaway is you got to work hard for what you want, and number two is, find that passion that drives you, so that work isn't work. Right. I just came back from vacation. I was out for 2 weeks, which is a long time to be out on vacation. But honestly, I was excited to get back at it. Right. And granted, I still could be on the beach sipping a margarita, but I was excited to get back in, touching base with my clients, seeing where my team was at with close, talking to my network, closing a deal. And I think that just goes to say that I really enjoy what I do. And I feel like, once you find that passion of something that you're really excited about, and it's, a community that you want to be involved with, or a purpose that you want to be part of to drive forward, to grow. I'm really excited about this, startup community here in LA. I've seen it 5 years ago. It's nothing where it is today. We have 300 different VCs in LA.
It is genuinely exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. And every different type of company, especially in LA, is getting funded. I mean, I just, I have a couple clients that are in the entertainment production, space, right? 5 years ago, no one was funding production startup companies, right? So being part of something, watching it grow, and really genuinely, authentically wanting to be part of that and see that grow and do what I can to help it grow healthy is really a big part of how I feel, why I'm able to get up every day and enjoy what I do.
That's awesome. So if I could just summarize it for you, it's expect to work a lot of hours, but you should do that because that's how you learn and set yourself up to be a CFO, and then find something you're passionate about along the way there, and that's how you're going to feel like you're never working again, and you're going to enjoy what you're doing. Is that fair?
Yeah. And awesome. The final note is people, your network. It is your core, and you cannot go anywhere or build a team without it. I've hired a lot of people. I've worked for a lot of people. And that's really that network and where you grow. And sometimes you haven't talked to people for 10 years. Like me and you haven't talked in a couple of years, right, Mike? I know you've been busy, but you don't have to keep in touch. You don't have to have coffee, once a quarter to keep in touch. And it's really just building that network and continuing to be productive and being able to reach out to people and be helpful and valuable to them. It's so important. It really goes a long way. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to startup companies in a sales deal, and it wasn't a good fit. It wasn't a good fit. It wasn't the right time, but they wanted me to spend an hour, look at their deck, or what do you think about this? And I've given advice, and it's taken me 10, 15 minutes of my time. And I can probably count on two hands how many times that's turned into a referral to a founder of business. Yeah. And so it really, that saying that, you give, it comes back around eventually is, is definitely true. I truly believe that what goes around comes around, and I don't give for something in return, but knowing that, hey, this person's going to think of me the next time they talk to somebody and say, oh, I'm looking for a CFO or an outsource. And they're like, oh my gosh, you have to talk to Ronette. I mean, that's the email I told you are the only person that came to mind. Here's a referral, and getting a referral in like that is amazing, right? I mean, because now hopefully they're just talking to you and nobody else, but you're already getting that strong referral, and that first conversations is pretty strong to begin with. So
awesome. That's an excellent point. All right. Well, let's wrap it on that thought. So thank you so much, Ronette, for joining us today. That was super insightful. And we'll go ahead and share this out. I hope it's helpful for the audience and drove value for everyone.
Yep. Thanks,
all right,
Mike.
Thank you. And I'm going to show off the Dodger hat one more time before I go. There we go.
Do it. Go Dodgers. I love it.
All right.
All right.
Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Ronette.